Although last year was affected by the COVID pandemic, a total of just over 10 million metric tons of coffee were consumed during the 12-month period, which makes coffee one of the most beloved beverages worldwide. Coffee travels a long way and goes through many hands and processes to end up at your home or in a coffee shop. So where does coffee come from? And what does it take for coffee to end up in your cup? Coffee production starts at growing a coffee plant, which can take up to 5 years to produce its precious fruit. It was once native to tropical Africa and Asia, but now coffee is found around the world. The trees, especially those that produce high-end coffee, only thrive in certain climates. Typically, those found near the equator, with ample sunshine, steady day-to-night temperatures, plenty of rain, well-draining and mineral-rich soils, and high elevation. The regions where coffee beans come from are collectively known as the Coffee Belt. Brazil is still the largest coffee producer in the world, as 40% of the global demand is grown in Brazil. Its tropical climate and rich soil, as well as its huge landmass, makes it the ideal location to grow coffee trees. Brazil is also known to be the country that pays its farmers better than most other coffee-producing countries. Coffee plants produce fruits known as coffee cherries. At the heart of each of them are 2 beans, which are the seeds of the plant. There are 4 different types of coffee beans: Robusta, Arabica, Excelsa and Liberica, with Arabica and Robusta making up 99% of the coffee consumed. Arabica coffee beans are a type that are considered superior, with sweeter and more complex flavors, but they are more expensive and challenging to grow. Robusta has harsher flavors and more caffeine, but it can thrive under rougher conditions. In most regions, there's one major harvest season in a year. However, in several countries, such as Kenya and Colombia, there are 2. The coffee harvested at the beginning and the end of a season has a poorly developed flavor. That's why good roasters buy their coffee during mid-season. Coffee is always harvested in one of 2 ways. By strip picking, where the cherries are stripped off of the branch, either by hand or by machine, or by selective picking, where the cherries are hand harvested by people to ensure that only the ripe red cherries are picked and the green ones are left to ripen. Picking is carried out at 10-day intervals, since the cherries mature at different periods, and up to 3 pickings are needed to clear a farm. Since hand picking is a hard and labor-intensive process, it's mainly used to harvest the high-quality Arabica coffee. After harvesting, the cherries are processed as soon as possible to avoid spoilage. There are only 2 known ways of processing beans: dry processing and wet processing. Dry processing, also called natural processing, is the ancient method that is still popular in regions where water is scarce. The cherries are spread out on a large surface to dry in the sun and will be turned and ranked regularly throughout the day to ensure that they dry evenly. After 15 to 20 days, when the picked cherries have a moisture content of less than 11%, the outer layer, which has dried up and become black and brittle, can be removed. During this process, the beans absorb sugars from the fruit, which often makes natural processed coffee sweeter. Wet processing is a modern method and is called wet because it uses water to both move the coffee fruit through the process and to extract the beans. After the cherries are cleaned, they are put through a plopping machine that squeezes out the skin without damaging the beans. This is made possible by the fact that coffee beans are relatively hard. Coffee plopping leaves mucilage. This is why they then are put into large tanks where the beans are stripped with enzymes to ensure that all the mucilage is dissolved. The entire process takes approximately 24 hours. It's important to remove all the mucilage to ensure that beans are left with the flavor that was developed prior to this processing. The coffee beans are then washed again and dried in the sun or a machine for a day or 2. When the processing is done, the beans are sorted. All the bad beans are thrown out and the good ones are bagged and shipped. At this point, they are called green coffee beans. However, there's one final step: roasting the beans. Roasting seeks to transform the green coffee into the aromatic brown beans we know. Most roasting machines maintain a temperature of about 550 degrees Fahrenheit. The beans are kept moving throughout the entire process to keep them from burning. When they reach an internal temperature of about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, the so-called first crack happens. They're beginning to turn brown and the coffeeol, a fragrant oil locked inside the beans, begins to emerge. This process, called pyrolysis, is at the heart of roasting. It produces the flavor and aroma of the coffee that we drink. At this stage, coffee is light or medium roasted, and the roasting process can be stopped or continued to obtain a darker roast until they reach an internal temperature of around 440 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point the second crack happens. The beans turn from medium dark to dark brown, and you can see an oily sheen. After roasting, the beans are immediately cooled, either by air or water. Roasting is generally performed in the importing countries, because freshly roasted beans must reach the customer as quick as possible. The flavor of a roast depends on the time and temperature of roasting. Light roasted beans still taste mainly of the origin, with bright fruit and floral flavors. Medium roast coffees take on some flavors of caramelization from the roast. Dark roast coffees get much of their character from the roasting process, with toasted flavor notes and a full body. Ironically, it is assumed the stronger the flavor, the more caffeine. However, it is actually the opposite which is true. The longer the coffee beans roast, the more of the chemical caffeine is removed. You can buy your beans already roasted, but for the freshest experience, many people prefer to roast their own. But becoming an expert roaster takes years of training and experience. A good roaster has to know his beans and equipment. Roasting involves being able to accurately predict the internal temperature of individual beans, something that cannot be taught. It can only be learned from years of experience. Finally, the coffee is ground and brewed. The objective of a proper grind is to facilitate the extraction and get the most flavor in a cup. How coarse or fine the coffee is ground depends on the brewing method. There are many methods of brewing coffee, plus new ones are added all the time, but at their core they all do the same thing. The finer the grind coffee beans, the faster you can extract them. That's why you need finely ground coffee to pull a quick shot of espresso. A medium grind is for a pour over, and a coarse for slow method like French press or cold brew. So coffee is more than just a final brewing process. It's a lengthy process, which starts as a simple coffee berry and eventually, after many steps and a lot of hard work, finds its final destination in the cups of coffee consumers all around the world.